Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome to episode 50 of She Rebel Radio, Finding the Joy in Marketing with Sophie Turton. Sophie is the director and co-founder of The Joyful Web, which is a marketing and communications company for conscious businesses. Sophie has decades of experience in marketing. She's also a freelance writer and part of Belongcon, which is a social movement creating spaces where people can find belonging. Sophie, it's amazing to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to, sharing how we can find more joy in marketing.
Me too. It is one of my favourite subjects to talk about, unsurprisingly, really.
Perfect. So I'd love to kick off with why do you think many business owners, startups find the joylessness in marketing? What is it that they are doing wrong?
So marketing kind of has a bad reputation. It's known as it kind of swings either in being like this kind of evil machine that's all about manipulation and aggressive sales tactics, or it's about the flip chart department that just kind of have pretty pens and just don't really add any kind of value. And I think that's largely because, first of all, it's because businesses historically have approached marketing from the perspective of what can you do for me in terms of, more sales? How can we get more customers, regardless of who they are, regardless of whether they actually really engage with our brand? It's about how can we often make them feel insecure enough to buy from us, and that's kind of one element of it. And another element of it is also that it's not approached with a holistic view of the whole business. It's kind of seen as a sort of tag on the side or a nice to have of business, rather than looking at how business evolves as a whole with using your audience to guide you, rather than just sort of your audience being a last thought and you just broadcast out to them. And that, understandably so, creates quite a lot of sort of discontent within marketing. I know for myself personally, I was really kind of ashamed to be in marketing when I first started, because I just thought it was something that wasn't particularly wholesome or particularly helpful. I think it really comes back to that broadcasting element and really not about building relationships.
Yeah, and interestingly there you said, there's a real kind of, what can I get? I'm kind of marketing, what can I get from other people, whether they need it or not? How can I manipulate them to thinking they need it, whether they do or not? Instead of that, what can I give and how can I serve and how can I support the people that, do need my product or service or whatever it is?
Yeah, exactly that. It's kind of a backward system historically, when actually all it is about communication and relationships building, which I think we can agree is a really joyful thing when it's done with the, how can I serve rather than what can you do for me?
Yeah, and I think, when I first started a business, I, didn't have any experience in marketing, etc., and was kind of put off by that. But had it been called communications and relationship building, I'd be like, I can do that. I've done that for years as a lawyer and create a business by doing that.
Exactly. And a lot of the time, especially with smaller businesses, they're really, the person who set up their business is passionate about what they're doing and why they set up their business in the first place. So when they stop thinking about it as this sort of stressful sales machine that they just need to constantly be churning in, and start seeing it as a way to talk about the passion that they have for their business and the value that they provide to their customers, then suddenly it sort of flips it on its head and it's just about having conversations with people.
Absolutely. So did you, you mentioned that when you first kind of went into marketing, you felt ashamed to be there.
Yeah.
Was that something that was kind of a shock to you when you saw how things were working in the more traditional side of the industry, like compared to, you know, what you learned and then you went into it?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a journalism background, and I was working in China, so it was a very different situation over there for journalism, and came to the UK and was just like, you know, this industry is absolutely not for me. Like talking of industries that don't provide a level of fulfillment in terms of the way that they are with the world. So I kind of fell into marketing and specifically content marketing. And at first it was like, oh, great, I can get paid to write in a different kind of way than journalism. And I just had this preconceived notion that marketing was something that you don't do if you want to make a difference to the world. It was, in my head, it was like feeding that capitalist machine, which is something that I've always strongly disagreed with. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I had a lot of shame about it. I'd go to networking events and be like, I'm a marketing manager, but actually I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Please don't judge me.
I love that. Yeah, it's an interesting, and I've seen a lot of it in the coaching industry, in terms of that manipulation side of, it could be something really simple, but, an email like, oh, I forgot to put the link in, and it's a kind of a manipulation tactic. Mm-hmm. Rather, because it's kind of so what's the word? Pre-formatted, I was going to say, or preloaded. You kind of, when you've been in an industry for a while, you can kind of see through it. Mm. So have you got any advice for, people that are, maybe seen some bad experiences that's put them off in their own industry, of how they can approach it in a much better and more holistic and audience focused way, as you said?
Yeah, I think when you do see those kind of tactics, and I think there's a subconscious layer to humans in general that we know when we're being manipulated. It's like a survival tactic. It's a survival mechanism. So, we will all have that experience of like, oh, good, someone else is just trying to sell to me. And even worse, they're trying to pretend like they're not just trying to sell to me. So I always ask myself, what exactly is it about this that bothers me? Whereas someone else who's also wanting to grow their business and wanting to sell does it in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm being manipulated. And I think it's really about being as honest as you can possibly be and as authentic as you can possibly be, not just in the way that you're approaching it. So none of that like undercover tactics, like you were saying, like never try to trick somebody, because they will know. Mm-hmm. Even if it's on a subconscious level, they will know, and that will massively impact the trust that they have for your business. And if you are trying to sell, then there's nothing wrong with saying that you're trying to sell. Like, you don't need to pretend like you're not. Especially, it's business. People expect that. And I think it comes back to like, who are you? What do you have that's valuable that someone else could really benefit from? And then talk from that space, and then make it be about actually providing someone with something that they can take away and make use of, rather than undercurrently trying to get them through your sales funnel to then be like, and then here, this is the real point of this conversation that maybe they didn't realize at the beginning.
Yeah, that kind of chewing people up and spitting them out the end of the funnel. Even the tactics of, this is only this price, today, and it's not, that's not the reality of it. And again, I think people are really waking up to that now as well, aren't they? Particularly online, of those kind of strategies that are being used.
Yeah, and it also goes against advertising standards. Like, if you pretend like you've reduced the price of something, or you pretend like there's an offer that you say is going to be just this amount of time, and then you just have it like however long you just feel like it, like that's actually in breach of advertising standards. So it's not legal to do that, and that's for a good reason, because it's manipulative, and consumers need to be protected from that. But more importantly, really, is just it's not a way to build honest connections with people.
Yeah, and you said the word trust, and it's so critical, particularly with service-based businesses, that you create that trust with your audience, isn't it?
Exactly that. So, you were saying about the funnel, and people sort of like traditionally marketing and sales kind of worked with get as many people, doesn't really matter who they are, as many people in the top of the funnel, and then kind of shove them down a bit like a sausage and then some of them will come out the bottom and be customers, and then maybe we forget about them too because they've dropped off out of the bottom of the funnel. Whereas how we approach marketing is more like a flywheel, where you've got your marketing, your sort of marketing, sales and service work together to sort of keep the flywheel moving, so that you're building those connections through your marketing, which is all about making connections with people, building communities, having authentic conversations around things that people really care about, and providing real value without asking for anything in return. Then you've got your, product or service and sort of sales element of that, whereby, again, your product and service is the best it can possibly be. You're offering as much value as you can possibly offer. So people really will benefit from becoming one of your customers, or those that will benefit from it. And then the flywheel continues, because then those people become like your advocates, and they bring more people in, and it's much more holistic, rather than just like whoever into the top of the funnel and then spit you out at the end and not really care about you as an individual.
Yeah, flywheel sounds so much more fun. It's kind of something. I don't know why Lost Boys, the film, is coming into my head, where I know that wasn't always fun when the vampires came out, but on an amusement park, having fun, have fun with your marketing. That's the whole point, isn't it?
100%. Have fun with your marketing. Like, that's what we always say to our clients. Like, marketing should not be boring. It shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't just be something you have to tick off your list, like, oh, I've got to write another social post because someone told me that I need to do that every day. God. Like, it should be like, I've got something to say and people are going to benefit from hearing it. And I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, and again, making that, it sounds like you said, it used to be a numbers game. And I think, and that's certainly when I started with an online business, post as much as possible, even if it doesn't really mean anything. And and I think there's been a real shift, hasn't there, in the last couple of years into that posting quality and content that can be valued and people can actually get some use out of than just making noise, for example.
Yeah, exactly. There is enough noise on the internet, and especially since we've had lockdown and so many businesses that were traditionally offline have had to come online, it's just amplified the noise even more. And so it's really, really important for businesses to start looking at ways to niche into conversations with their audiences and actually really provide something that's different from their competitors and that resonates with the people that they're targeting.
Absolutely. So you said there with the flywheel, the approach that you use at Joyful Web, marketing, sales and service and bringing that all together. So why should marketing not be compartmentalized, can't say that word today, as part, as a separate department in a business or your solo show, etc.? Why should it be a thread that's running out throughout the whole business and all of those elements of your business?
I think if we take away the word marketing and the connotations that has, and instead swap it with communication, then it is the whole kind of package for your business. And it comes into every single element, not just about how you're communicating with potential customers, but also how you're communicating with existing customers and how you're communicating internally with your people. And communication doesn't even just mean your verbal or written communication. It's also your actions and how you're showing up in the world and how you want to be seen as a business and how you want to have a social impact and how you want to be as an employer. And all of these different elements come into building successful brands. So if you only look at marketing in terms of like, okay, well, we need to, sales are down this month. We need to up our sales. So we need to get as much in the sausage machine as possible. And then we're only going to be looking at like traditionally marketing uses loads of jargon. Like, our SEO needs to be up, and our cost per acquisition needs to be up, and our cost per click, and like, it really reduces people to numbers.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, that might work, maybe, but then what? Then what are we going to do with the people who come through, our funnel in that traditional sense? How are we going to nurture those people? How are we going to ensure that they get the best possible product or service? How are we going to get them to come back for more? How are we going to get them to tell their friends about us and feel like they've had an exceptional service? And if you're only looking at one part of that, then you're kind of missing a trick, really, in how you can make your business absolutely exceptional.
And for those, you talked about all the different elements, and there's so many little pieces there. For those that might be listening, who are feeling a bit overwhelmed now of all those elements, when they were like trying to separate it out, where would be a really good place for them to kind of start to look at this, to find that kind of consistency piece?
Do you know, actually, just before I go into that, if you're listening and you're feeling overwhelmed, I think it's really important to remember that the marketing industry traditionally is designed to make you feel overwhelmed. Like, that's the reason that there are all of these acronyms, and it feels like some kind of dark art of like getting your website seen on Google and all of these kind of things. It's actually really not as complicated as traditional marketing agencies would have you believe. So with that in mind, take a deep breath. Everything is great. And it all comes back to why your business exists in the first place, what it is that you're trying to achieve out there in the world. At The Joyful Web, we only work with businesses that are doing more than selling a product and service. And I would go even further to argue that every business really should be doing something more than just selling a product or service. And that means, having a vision and a mission that's bigger than you know yourself to be, and having some really core values in place. Like four is enough. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. And then after you've kind of got that groundwork of like why you exist in the first place and what you want to see out there in the world, it could be even the smallest thing. It doesn't have to be like world changing. It could just be that you're trying to change something about the industry that you work in that you don't think works very well. And then that gives you a really solid foundation from which to communicate, because you're talking about something that really matters to you, rather than trying to, like, things that don't work are like 10 ways that you can use your toothbrush differently, like, for example, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, those kind of listicles that traditionally have been used by businesses, that's kind of the old way of doing it. And now it's about businesses having an identity and having a point of view and talking about their point of view. And if you start to do that and start to really talk from your heart, then the rest of it will follow.
Yeah, I love that. And there's got to be a real, someone said to me in terms of starting a podcast, it's got to be something that you could talk about, for the next 10 years, if not more. You've got to love it that much and be that rooted in your why. And that's so important, because it's got to be a joy to turn up, and for those of you that didn't realize, She Rebel Radio is a marketing element in my business, but it is a free one, but it is something that I the whole why behind She Rebel Radio I could sit and talk about all day to guests on my solo shows. It's so important with providing that value. And you mentioned value, our values as a business owner, and also valuing our audience. I think you've already sort of said how important that is. Is there anything else that you can kind of add around that?
Well, I think it's the most important element. And when we work with businesses and we work on brand development, so businesses might come to us and sometimes they might even be 20 years old, but have no real core brand identity. And so in that case, we work to help them to come up with, like I said before, the mission and the vision. And that always starts with identifying what their values are. Yeah. And then every strategy that we do, every communication piece that we do, always is based on those 4 values. And so I think it's the most important thing that any individual person can look at in their life. And as a result, businesses being an extension of that is, if you don't know what your values are, then how do you know that you're going in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a filter, isn't it, for everything else. How do businesses survive for 20 years without knowing what their values are?
Wow, that's a good question. Honestly, like I've worked with some very successful businesses that have not had this piece in place. And I think it's because things have changed so much, definitely in the last sort of 4 to 5 years. And historically, which is how marketing got its bad reputation in the first place, people weren't so aware, people weren't so conscious. I think the rising of people's consciousness is going hand in hand with the need for them to feel like when we spend our money, we're voting with our pound. And more people want to know that where they're spending their money is with a business that aligns with their values.
Yeah, totally. And women have 75% of the world's spending power.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, interesting. And, traditionally, though, most businesses designed by men, and we've seen a real shift for that. And I think, as women, our values are incredibly important. And that rising consciousness, as you said, and somewhere I read, I can't remember what book it was now, I'm always quoting books, but that things aren't hierarchical anymore, they're territorial. The population and your competition, in inverted commas, isn't just another shop or lawyer or marketer or coach down the road, it's worldwide. Exactly. You've got to have that filter again, haven't you?
Yeah, and so historically it would be like your buying decision would be based on something like cost, quality, and that would probably be it. Convenience might be part of it, but now with so much global competition, like you said, there's also the element of, does this actually align with where I want to be? Am I in integrity when I spend my money in this place? And also, really importantly, do I resonate with, especially as a service provider, do I resonate with the service provider enough to feel like I'm really going to get a fantastic experience with hiring these people? And as a product provider, it's just this product, like Lucy and Yak comes to mind, of a brand that has built a phenomenal reputation because of their values, and their product is good. There's no doubt about that, but it's not better than pretty much any other product that's out there on the market. But it's got a bit of a cult following, because to wear a Lucy and Yak overalls is a statement about who you are as a person. And that's becoming more and more important. And I think probably especially for women.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that. Am I in integrity when I spend my money here? I always do training on integrity in your pricing. When you're pricing your services, etc. But am I in integrity when I spend my money with a product or service is something I think many of us are asking ourselves and checking in with.
Yeah, and certainly it's been something that I've really come face to face with since lockdown, and had the space to reevaluate my spending habits, and have massively shifted to only spending my money with independent stores because of wanting to support them and wanting to support the local economy, and realizing how much I have been an unconscious spender for most of my life. And really, really wanting to, one of our key missions at the Joyful Web is to create more conscious businesses, and more conscious businesses create more conscious consumers. So, and that's, to me, that's how we change the world, is through changing the course of capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, more conscious spending, really, really important. Totally agree. And sorry, slightly distracted because the window cleaner's just arrived. Totally jumped out my skin. So I'm hoping that's not coming through on here. So tell me, with the changes that we've talked about in the last 4 or 5 years in particular, is it even more important that we market with a roadmap and strategy? And tell me, I think I learned the hard way, what happens when we don't market with a roadmap or a strategy, particularly now?
Yes, it's so important. And I think maybe the best way to understand this is we each have a personality, and our personality as an individual, our personality is what people know us by. And it's no different for a business. So the more that you are true to your personality, which is what is defined by the kind of preliminary part of that strategy, which is the brand identity, and the strategy basically forms the identity in action. So it shows you where you're going to be talking about specific things, how you're going to be talking about specific things, why anyone should care about what you're talking about. And it really helps you to provide a consistent approach to showing up with your business identity. And if you don't do that in the same way as a person, if our identity and our personality changes every time our friend sees us, that's going to be very confusing and potentially quite off-putting for somebody. And it definitely doesn't build trust and assurance with that relationship. And it's the same with a business. And we've seen people not have a strategy, not have a core brand identity, and just kind of putting posts out willy-nilly, or even when they do campaigns, the campaign isn't particularly aligned to anything substantial when it comes to values. And it's really all just about selling. And then the business looks very frantic and doesn't come across as a business that is, that knows itself and that has something really of importance to say. And the result of that is that people aren't going to listen, and people aren't going to buy into it. And even if people aren't going to become your customers immediately, the goal really is about building a community. And because even if they never become your customer, it's, if you can support somebody in something through the way you're communicating, then that's a fantastic thing. And it could lead to them telling one of their friends about you, even if they don't become your customer. So I think a strategy is absolutely essential for keeping yourself aligned, but also for knowing that you're even having any kind of impact in the first place.
Yeah, really powerful there. You said strategy being identity in action. And without it turning up, in a different personality every day, it's kind of frantic. Personality disorder kind of like sprung to mind.
Yeah.
No one really knows what they're getting, on a day-to-day basis, and they're not going to listen and they're not going to buy. So yeah, absolutely critical. So why is our voice and self-expression really critical? And what advice would you have? I think we've already touched upon it, but to help people, women who are listening to this, to find that more easily.
Well, yeah, we were talking before we hit record about how women historically struggle with self-expression. And definitely the female business owners that we've worked with have struggled with that more.
Yeah.
I think on the one hand, if you are a sort of solo or small business owner, then the chances are that your business has been built because you have a passion for something, and that's why you started it in the first place. Or like in our case, we just hated the marketing industry so much and had seen such bad practice from bigger agencies that we wanted to do it differently. And that the importance of talking about that like key reason why you started your business is that if you don't talk about it, then first of all, you're never going to change anything, because you need to be that change for any kind of change to actually happen.
Yeah.
And second of all, you're not going to be able to enroll anybody in your vision. And the self-expression part of running a business is about having a vision, like I said before, that's bigger than yourself, and then enrolling people in that vision. And I'm all about creating revolutions. Every client that ever comes to us, I'm like, let's have a revolution.
I love the posh voice that came in there. A revolution. And
I think that's kind of what it is. It's kind of having these mini revolutions. And then
I was going to add in there, and she rebellions. That's what we're all about. She Rebel Radio.
And then the bigger businesses, because, you know, you might be a marketing director for a bigger business listening right now. It's not the same, because it's not, the bigger business has its own brand identity. It's not so much about the individuals. However, I've always seen a much more powerful impact when bigger businesses use the voices of their people and the voices of their communities to kind of fuel their marketing. And then, I mean, I'm a massive advocate of user-generated content. Just another, I'm watching my language, douchey marketing speak for you know, using your customers and getting them involved in telling the story.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of some of the big brands that do that really well, and I can't think now in terms of using their customers. There's
been loads. I mean, one of the biggest brands that had a real success on this was Burberry, and they created like a kind of hub where people could showcase their Burberry Macs in different parts of the world. And like, I mean, this isn't the sort of brand that I would work with, but it's just one that I had. And then it's kind of, they kind of using their brand, like their audiences to kind of show off what their product looks like and to show the kind of love that they have for it. A lot of brands that are like much smaller brands that there's one that I can't remember the name of, but they're a clothing brand, and they created a platform they were one of the first brands to create a platform for people to upload pictures of themselves in the clothing to show what they actually look like on different people's bodies.
And I think there's been some lovely, like amazing independent clothes shops that I love in Brighton that have been doing that over lockdown. You know, people in their gardens and stuff. It's been really cool and really good to see.
Yeah, and people love that. I mean, that's why, I don't know if you've heard of like that Frock Up Friday group on Facebook.
No.
It's just a lovely group. It's got like thousands of people all over the UK in it now, and it's just people posting pictures of themselves dressed up on a Friday. And it's been so popular because people relate to people, and they don't, you know, that's the best thing that's been happening recently is it's like the model kind of way of being, where it was just unobtainable type body types put out there as the norm, is no longer. And now we're actually seeing, like, heaven forbid, cellulite on an advert on ASOS.
I know. I just like, but it's women tearing this up, isn't it? We're like, we've had enough of it. Yeah, and I think one of the brands that also sprung to mind was Dove. You know, they were one of the first, weren't they, years ago with the soap, you know, using normal women in their ads, which I thought was great at the time.
Yeah.
It was ahead of its time, wasn't it? In terms of seeing real women in their underwear that looks like a normal woman like we all do.
Exactly, yeah. And there's another one that I really like, a brand called Billy, which is a razor brand and clean. They do like face wipes, but like clean face wipes. And or eco-friendly face wipes, and they celebrate body hair in all its different types, which you'd think traditionally you'd be like, well, you're trying to sell a razor. Why would you celebrate women choosing to keep body hair?
Yeah.
So well, because they're saying everything and everyone is perfect as they are. If you choose to shave, great, we've got a product for you. But if you don't, we support you anyway. And that, to me, that is very, very indicative of how I hope the industry goes. Like, we will celebrate you anyway, even if you don't want to buy from us.
Yeah, love that. Amazing. So before I ask you kind of what's next for you in the Joyful Web, have you got any last minute tips about how business owners, you know, new or established, can find more joy in their marketing instead of just sending it to someone else and totally disconnecting from it and thinking it's got nothing to do with me? Any last tips?
I think if you are going to outsource it, do it with an agency that you can create a partnership with, and don't let anybody be your voice. You wouldn't let some random person that you only met in a meeting once or twice speak for you. So it's the same when you let someone speak for your business. It's really important that you create a relationship with whoever is supporting you on that road, and that they truly understand where you're coming from before they do anything for you in terms of communication. My main advice really is your brain is going to tell you that this is really, really complicated and terrifying, and that's completely normal. And it's not. It really isn't. If you've got to this point with your business, then I can assume that you're up to something that people need or want, and that you've got passion, and that you are here to make an impact in some way. And that doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It can be your own way of making an impact. That's just perfect as it is. But you've already got that. And so to be successful with your marketing literally means just finding a way to communicate what you already have in a way that's firstly true to you, and secondly resonates with the people that you're talking to. So my first main place to start will be to get really, really clear on what your values are, and then get clear on how you want to communicate those values to your audiences. And then just start having conversations with people that align with those values and that align with those messages that you want to be putting out there. Like, so for you, Lulu, it's all about empowering women in business and, changing the status quo and helping women to realize that they have a voice, and that that things that, being part of seeing the change for the world within that.
Yeah.
And that's what you talk about all the time. And that's how people know you. And it's because you talk about that all the time. And I think, become a broken record.
Yeah. Do it. Yeah. And I think you can get really, people can get worried. And I know I went through that. I feel like, am I boring people, talking about the same thing? But that's what they expect. That's what you talk about. That's the value of why you're here and what you have to deliver.
Exactly. And until the whole world is talking the same hymn sheet that you're talking from, your job is not done. Keep talking.
Keep expressing, keep getting it out there. Definitely. Oh, amazing. It's been so good to have you on. And there's so many nuggets of gold in this episode. I would love to know what's next for you and what's next for the Joyful Web.
Well, what's next for me is that I'm moving to Yorkshire. The countryside is calling me, and I'm setting up the Joyful Web office out of Leeds. We're still going to have our office down in Brighton, so we're basically just expanding into the north, which is very exciting, and just in terms of meeting new people, having new connections, and finding out about new visions for people and how we can support with making that come alive and communicating that to their audiences. And we're continuing to develop our we've got a process called the Joyful Way, which takes businesses from the mindset piece, which is the blockages around self-expression, and then brings them into the expansion piece, which is the strategy and the brand development, and then brings them into mastering their own marketing, which is something that we feel very passionately about, helping businesses to do it for themselves rather than to give their power away to agencies, which we don't really like, marketing agencies. So for us, it's just about continuing to talk about the same thing that we've been talking about since we started 3 years ago, which is changing the way that the world does marketing.
Love it. Thank you so much for being with us today. Anything else you want to share before you go? Just
have fun. Like you said earlier, Lulu, it's about having fun with your communication and not being afraid to maybe not, I hate the word fail, but when I say fail, I mean, it might not work, and that's okay, because then you can have a look at why it didn't work, which is why the strategy is really important, and try something else and just play around with it and kind of see it more like a playful environment for which you can express and expand your business, rather than seeing it as like some kind of chore, or worse, some money sapping SEO bashing.
SEO bashing, love it.
Yeah, so I really hope that listening to this episode has maybe inspired you to go away and maybe look at your marketing in a different light and try and have a bit more fun with it.
Incredible. Thanks so much. I will speak to you really soon.
It was lovely to chat.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach, Lulu Mims. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mims on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mims and on Instagram at LuluMims_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.